say this. Are the Tigers the best team in baseball? I guess the proper title for this podcast would then be I'll ask this, because I just asked a question. But for the sake of continuity, Austin, you know what title to throw up there on the podcast feed. Welcome into the program. As we are going to talk and dive into what is currently the best team in Major League Baseball according to record, and that is the Detroit Tigers. And I am exceptionally grateful that we live in a world in which I can say that. And you count your blessings with this team, and we really went through it. And we are going to talk about all that. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the program, just want to say, at Castellani 2014 on Twitter, everything you want to find, you can find on CastellaniContent.com. And guess what? If you just want to find, I'll say this, it's there on YouTube, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, whatever your heart desires. I'm yet to meet a person who has watched the show on YouTube, listened on Apple Podcasts and Spotify all simultaneously. Send me a video of you doing that, and I don't know, I'll give you a cookie or something, because that's quite impressive. All right, let's jump into the heart of the show, and we are going to start by talking about the continually red-hot Detroit Tigers, who had played 6 games this week. They went 5-1 after dropping that home series to Texas. They sweep the Boston Red Sox, and then they win 2 out of 3 north of the border against America's 51st state, which I got in a lot of trouble for jokingly tweeting about when the Tigers won on Friday. But they win 2 out of 3 against the Blue Jays. 5 one-run games, I believe, this week, which is pretty crazy to think about. The Tigers lost 1 of those, and they won 4 of them. So it was obviously very eventful, obviously very tense, and the Red Sox sweep was really miraculous. And I guess we'll start with what was the story of that series, and let's be real, potentially the story of the season so far, and that was the heroics of Javier Baez. Let's dive into it now, because this is going to be an interesting show. We're 47 games into this season. So we're coming up on Memorial Day, and for a lot of people, Memorial Day is one of the first big checkpoints of the season. There's Memorial Day, there's 4th of July, there's the All-Star break, where the casual fan kind of checks, it used to be the newspaper, but now checks MLB.com, and they say, okay, what's this record? Oh, well, okay, this team's still pretty good. I might go to a few games, right? We're at the point in the season where the things that are strengths are no longer fluky, and the things that are weaknesses or could be weaknesses are things that you look at and say, okay, that could be a detriment to the team. That's something that could hurt the team. And I do want to discuss that. But obviously, the Javi Baez resurrection man, I forgive me, man. All these days are running together. But it was the middle of last week, a wild game against the Red Sox, right? A 11-inning thriller featuring 9 lead changes back and forth, ending with a Javier Baez 3-run shot to walk it off for the Tigers in miraculous fashion in extra innings. Maybe you can say this is recency bias. I would say from a regular season standpoint, maybe one of the top 10 moments in the history of Comerica Park. And or at least one of the top 10 games. I mean, that thing was as unpredictable as it got. Pitching was optional, but you just had offenses that were just seeing the ball. And you also had Javi earlier in the game who hit a 3-run shot as well. So that was one of those special ones. You know, that there's the Maglio game. There's the Galarraga game. That one there, that will be remembered as the Javi game, regardless of what happens the rest of this season. But Javier Baez now, because he also had some heroics in the first game of the Toronto series, this is something that's beyond just like a hot stretch. Like Akil Baddoo in 2021, that was a hot stretch that fizzled out. Now, obviously, he ended up having a fine rookie year, but like the ascension, what he was doing in the early part, that didn't last. We're deep enough into the season now where we can look at what Javier Baez is doing and wonder like how real this is, how sustainable it is. I'm just going to get this out of the way real quick. And people can say that I'm being a negative Nancy, that I'm a pessimist, or just a Javi Baez hater, which I'm not a hater of anybody. Okay. I don't like Javi Baez kind of players, which is guys who have zero knowledge of the strike zone. What I do like are guys who play for the Tigers and help them win. Javi has done a tremendous job of that this season, so I kind of like him again. It's weird how that works. I still maintain the belief that there will be a massive fall off. If he has or continues to have some kind of all-star caliber campaign, I will officially just come to terms with the fact that nobody in baseball knows anything, and that includes me, because I understand people have tried to throw the excuses out there. Oh, well, now he's moved down in the lineup. Oh, it's the team is playing better. Oh, he got a new hip. He had hip surgery. Let me tell you something. Unless that hip had eyeballs on it that could, locate a slider in the other batter's box, I really don't think that's much of a change. Sorry. Like, I get it. He's healthy again. And that's wonderful. Okay. But the second he got injured last year, the team went on this crazy run. And I'm sorry, I don't think that was a coincidence. Like, I really do think he was a black hole in that lineup, whether you put him at the top of the order, middle of the order, bottom of the order. No, the one thing I've said for the last few weeks now is I have to give him credit from a character standpoint of unselfishly saying, yeah, I'll play center field. I mean, I felt that way really since the spring training when it became an idea. Because one of the things that I will admit I was wrong about with Javi, and I'm not the only fan who shared this perspective. In the first 3 years he was here, given his free swinging nature and superhuman lack of production, just based on the eyeball test, you kind of got the impression this wasn't a guy that cared that much about baseball anymore. I will admit I was wrong about that. That this was not a, hey, I got my money, I'm going to stop trying type of thing, which has happened in baseball before. I mean, it happened. Remember when we gave Jonathan Scope that extension and he came to camp overweight? So I take that back. That is a different side of Javi than what I expected to see. He is significantly more engaged. He does want to help this team win, and the move to center field has proven that. Now, about that move to center field, this is where my brain is in a permanent pretzel. Javi Baez is a great defensive center fielder. And enough time has passed, and we've seen him make enough spectacular game-changing plays where, like, that's definitive, right? Like, this is something, that kind of defensive production is something that can last over a season. And it has led to people asking me the question, what happens to Javier Baez when Parker Meadows comes back? Let me just make something abundantly clear, and I think AJ is feeling this way as well. I don't know if he'll specifically say it. Parker Meadows is this team's center fielder. And unless Parker gets put in the lineup and is just not hitting the baseball whatsoever, I have a hard time believing that he's getting Wally pipped here by Javier Baez. I just don't. And Javi has done great things in center. I think that what Javi can then become is kind of a greater version, and I like this guy, but a greater version of what McKinstry is, which is we can play you as much as we want and move you around the diamond as much as we want. We want to play you at short. If there's a lefty on the mound, great. If we want to put you at third, great. If we want to put you at second or in a corner outfield spot, that's fantastic. And AJ loves that versatility, and Javi will be able to provide that. What he's been able to do in center field and what he's been able to do with the bat even more so is nothing shy of remarkable. The fact that you're seeing national platforms talk about whether or not Javier Baez is back is crazy. And I'm going to continue to be a pessimist just because, to me, guys who don't draw walks, guys who don't have a great knowledge of the strike zone, it's inevitable that they hit some sort of wall. And we've seen Javi slam face first into walls at points, not just in his time in Detroit, but also in his time with, in Chicago in the COVID year. Like these things have happened to him. With that said, the one thing that I have driven home, the point I've driven home from the very beginning about all of this, is that the Tigers have been without some key pieces. Looks like they're about to get Matt Vierling back. That's great. What you need in their absence is production from guys that you don't expect. And truthfully, there's a lot of this season that isn't that far off from what I expected. I knew this would be a good pitching staff. I knew Tarek would continue to shove, and whether maybe Jack hasn't been as good as we expected, but Mize filled in and has been great. The pitching's really good. Bullpen more often than not is solid. This season and how we felt about this season changed when we saw that Spencer Torkelson and Javier Baez had a pulse. And one I think is a little bit more sustainable than the other. But I also want to talk about Torque just a little bit real quick and say it's a unique thing, and I'm very happy for him. And while I will never claim to have that much power, there are these days in which I genuinely think the Tigers read my tweets, because all offseason, when people ask me, what does a good line for Torkelson look like in 2025? The one thing I said is, I don't need him batting 300. I don't need him with a 450 on base. I don't need him necessarily hitting 45 to 50 home runs. I'll take it, obviously, but it's a big park. What I need is when guys get on base in high leverage situations, I need him driving runners in. And let's be real, even when he was good his first few seasons, which is mainly just the second half of 23, he was not good in high leverage situations, in driving guys in, runners in scoring position, when it was a tie game, an opportunity to get his team back into the game. And all year so far, again, 47 games in, so we're just about a quarter, a little over a quarter, it has been the antithesis of the Torkelson we've seen over the last 3 years. This guy has collected clutch hit after clutch hit after clutch hit. You look at yesterday's game, you come off the tough loss on Saturday. He drives in 2 off of Berrios in the first inning, ends up getting the game-winning hit later in the game, and I believe the 7th inning drove in the Tigers' only runs. The batting average is irrelevant to me at that point. The slugging is really good, and the high leverage moments, those clutch moments, have been key for Spencer Torkelson. We cannot take anything away from that. Again, long ways to go, but if you want to start having the discussion about whether or not this is a guy who belongs in the American League All-Star team, probably not starting because there is, politicking involved. I will absolutely listen to that conversation and to that argument. I think his production has changed the landscape of this team. And I got to give our friend Scott Bentley of Locked On Tigers a lot of credit, who flat out said on Chris and Company at the beginning of the year, so much of what happens to this team offensively and defensively, whether it's second base, third base, first base, what have you, is dependent on what Spencer Torkelson does. And right now, I'm not going to call it an embarrassment of riches, but I'm going to call it a solid amount of riches, because you have Tork, who can play first in DH. You have Colt Keith, who has been seeing the ball phenomenally well over the last few weeks. And you have Glaber, who's as professional a hitter as there is in the American League Central right now. It's a really good sign. And, I bring up Javi, I bring up Torkelson, and you go back and you watch the games that they won, especially the Boston series, the first game where they just hammered them. They scored 9 runs in 1 inning. But that second game where, it required them to get guys in motion. It required them to get big hits. And Tork and Javi are a huge piece of this, but it goes with everybody. It starts with Carey at the top of the order, whether it's, your pinch hitting guys, platooning guys, Andy Ibanez has been productive. I mean, I could list any number of players. I mean, fucking until a few days ago, Tomas Nido was batting like 300 for this team. That is and has been the number one surprise, and the biggest difference with this team is that I never feel like they're out of a game because I trust this offense. Now, in the latter part of last season, we saw that amazing run, but so much, even the games that they won in which they got big hits, so many of the wins that they got in the latter part of last season were late inning comeback wins in which they only gave up a few runs. It would be a home run here or there, but they might have kept it close. The offense continually, and this shined through in the postseason as well, continually left runs on the board or wasn't able to finish opportunities when there were guys on base. When this team applies pressure, they often get the other pitcher to pop. And I think they deserve a ton of credit for that. And as much as we praise Chris Fetter and I worship the ground the guy walks on, I think that you got to show a lot of love to Michael Brodar and the hitting coaches here, because I think the approaches are just so much more consistent. It doesn't feel like this is a team that's pressing. And look, there's weaknesses in every lineup. Like, if you got Riley Green in a high leverage situation, all you got to do is put a lefty against him. But that's more that's more of a psychological thing to me. The ability is there with these guys. The eye is there. And I think the adjustments and the amount of buy-in has been staggering. We talk about it with the pitchers, but it's with the hitters as well. And I think, and I talked about this with AJ before the season, I think it's where having a young team really helps, because the fact that you have somebody like a Justin Henry Malloy who can come off the bench and pinch hit in the 10th inning of a game, and then the next day, hit leadoff. It's a unique thing. This is the kind of roster that we can expect from the Scott Harris, AJ Hinch era. This is never going to be an organization, I think, that's going to hand out a $300 million contract. I don't think it'll ever be the most talented roster, but you manipulate the lineups and you pick and choose the way that AJ has, you can have one of the smartest rosters. And I think that they've been able to do that. And so, yeah, right now, this is, according to record, and that's all we can go off at this point, and run differential, which does matter, is the best team in baseball. And I guess I should just talk about where my emotions are at, because it's a weird thing, and I think that a lot of fans are going through this right now, where this is so much fun. I'm having a blast. I'm sure that the players are having a blast. The media, I mean, this is ecstasy. The Tigers are really good, and they're consistent, and they're fun, right? But I'd be lying to you if I haven't asked myself, when the other shoe was going to drop. And then you elaborate upon that and you say, well, what defines the other shoe dropping? Is it this team missing the playoffs? Is it them losing several series in a row? Is it injuries? What have you? And I guess the question I've been asking myself repeatedly, because we are about 50 games into the season now, is this truly a team that is on par with the Dodgers, with the Mets, with the Padres, with these teams that have these massive payrolls and these superstar players? Detroit, record-wise, is right there with all of them. Do they belong there? And what I'm about to say is going to bother people. And maybe it's just the pure pessimist inside me coming out. I do not believe this is the best team in baseball. And maybe I'm just so scarred by what I've seen in the past. But I think the amount of random, I'm not going to call it random, the amount of guys who've stepped up in the absence of certain players has been really admirable. I just don't know how sustainable it is. We talked about it with Hobby. It's a case-by-case basis. Like, I think Torque looks good, but, McKinstry for a few weeks looked like an all-star. Like, are we going to expect that all season? I don't think so. I still think that and I said this the other week, this is the best team in the American League Central. And right now, I think they're 4.5 games up of Minnesota, who is red hot. So that, that proves it, at least up to this point. And I try to think of what a weakness could be. What is the thing that teams can exploit if they want to beat Detroit? And that is one area where ultimately the pitching is so good that everything else in a bizarre way can be somewhat irrelevant. Like if you're holding teams to 1 or 2 runs a game, who cares? Defensively, they have lost games. Colt Keith early in the season, you had a Trey Sweeney game against Houston. I think that's something. But against Toronto, I think that the potentially biggest problem with this team reared its ugly head, which is this is a good bullpen, and it is. In terms of run prevention, ERA, just consistency with the strike throwing, they have been very good. They don't have the one hammer in the back end of that pen. And I know the Tigers walked him off the other night because of the error on the Ibanez steal, but I use Aroldis Chapman as an example of that, where I think that this is a really good bullpen with a missing centerpiece. Now, could they find that centerpiece? Yeah. And look, Vest is great. Canley's been great. Like, I'm not saying that these guys are bums. It's just you saw in the Toronto series what happens when the staff is a little bit worn down from some high leverage innings, which they pitched a lot against Boston, and isn't as consistent with the strike throwing. They're vulnerable. I mean, I was waiting for them to lose that game on Sunday. You give them credit. He brought in Herter to get a big out. Like, there is depth to the pen, which I think is very important. And I will give them that. It's not just 1 or 2 guys who can come in and pitch high leverage. Like, AJ's asked a lot of these guys, and they've delivered. You've had some guys who've really struggled, like Brisky, who's been very inconsistent, though he did get the save on Friday. I think right now that is one thing that as the season goes along, we're going to pay more attention to. With that said, right around this time last year, in fact, it was a series against Toronto at home at Comerica against the Blue Jays, we talked about the fact that the bullpen didn't have a whole lot of swing and miss. And by the end of the year, the bullpen was nails, right? Now, I think what happened outside of just the team finding magic was Vest and Brisky, these guys came along and really did start missing bats. And even you had Herter as kind of the bulk guy who had that, he had that outing where he was untouchable against Baltimore. I do think the deeper you get into a season and the more reps a pitcher gets and the more that opposing teams get to see certain pitchers, the more it favors the hitter. And the greatest, equalizer, right? No one has ever hit a home run without making contact, right? If you're missing bats and you're getting swing and miss, that's why those guys are so valuable. It takes any sort of human element out of the game, right? No errors, no BABIP, no home runs. That's the result. I do think that could be an issue as we get further into the season because the bullpen is going to continue to be taxed. Now, I give them a ton of credit. They've won a lot of close games. They won a lot of high leverage games. And this is me simply trying to, maybe this is a shield, me trying to find something where I'm like, wait, is it really this good? Because let's be honest here. This happened overnight. It felt like it happened overnight. Like this team went from the Tigers we knew to the Tigers they are now. And so I think as a fan and as somebody who's watched every game for a decade, or more at this point, there is that part of me that's like, when do we revert back? When does the clock strike midnight? And at some point this year, I don't know when it'll be, I will just accept the fact that the page has been turned, and this team is destined to be one of the better teams in baseball. Now, the one thing I will add is, despite all my pessimism, right now, like, I think by a pretty wide margin, they're the best team in the American League. I know Texas beat them when we played it in Detroit, but I don't really look at, I mean, that's 3 games over a large sample size. If there's a year right now that I can compare this to, in which an AL Central team not only made it to the World Series, but won the World Series, I think back to 2015. 2015, that was a year where the Yankees were okay, but they were a wild card team. The Astros were kind of coming into their own. It was their first year of success in a while. The Rangers got hot in the second half and won the West. The Blue Jays made some trades in the second half, and they won their division. But the team that was the best team in the American League that entire year was the Kansas City Royals. And all year that year, we kept asking, okay, who's going to be the team that's going to knock off KC? Because someone's going to do it, right? Like, this isn't sustainable with their bullpen and their Royal ball and their base stealing. And they had a bunch of challengers, including a Blue Jays team that was stacked. I mean, that 2015 Blue Jays team was rock solid. And you know what? No matter how big the other team's payroll was, no matter what moves they made, it was that Royals team that found themselves as the last team standing. I almost feel like, just in terms of toughness and character, there is some resemblance, because those Royals teams were pesky as hell because they just didn't give a fuck. And they found ways to win games, and by 2015 standards, pretty unconventional ways. And with this team right now, it's something different every night, and it really is fun to watch. And regardless of what happens here, I mean, we have a long, fun summer of baseball coming up. It's awesome. It's awesome. I want to move on. Just one more thing that I want to talk about, which is that the Lions' schedule. Talk a little football here. The Detroit Lions' schedule was released, and before I get into it, I want to just make a claim that, again, it might be something that isn't popular. But just hear me out, okay? And I say that I'm only going to say this once, though I'm sure I'm probably going to say it 100 more times on the show. I think last year was the Lions' best shot of winning a Super Bowl with this core. Now, that does not mean that they will not win a Super Bowl or make it to a Super Bowl. That's me saying, when I look at the landscape of where the NFC was at last season, who the competitors were, how they matched up to those competitors, I felt like that was the best Lions opportunity. Right? So it's going to be tougher. And I mention that because the more eyeballs you have on you, and they've earned this. The Lions are a national brand at this point. This is a team that a lot of people talk about. This is not the scrappy team with, that's biting kneecaps. I mean, this is a flashy, explosive. They won 15 games last year. I mean, how much else do I have to tell you? It's one of the more popular, well-respected teams in the league right now. And often what happens is that you're going to get everyone's best shot. And mention all of this just to say, I am 100% certain, just in terms of record, there will be regression with the Lions this upcoming season. A reason for that is, and I don't know how it stacks up all time, but just based on the eyeball test, this is one of the most brutal schedules that I can remember. And just talking about the road, because the home schedule is easier. Just the road schedule is one of the toughest I've ever seen in football. I guess if we go down, I'll just talk about the road schedule because I don't want to list off all 17 games. But here's the road schedule, right, for this season. At Green Bay playoff team last year. At Baltimore, playoff team. At Cincinnati, not a playoff team, but they were a fringe playoff team that's, 3-4 years removed from making it to the Super Bowl. At Kansas City, in the Super Bowl last year. Won 2 out of the last 3 titles. At Washington, beat you in the playoffs last year. At Philly, won the Super Bowl last year. At Los Angeles, in the playoffs last year. At Minnesota, in the playoffs last year. And then you end in Soldier Field at Chicago, who's formidable. I mean, they're on the up and up, right? As is, I think, several other teams in this division. That is a gauntlet. I don't think I'm crazy for looking at this schedule and seeing 6 or 7 losses. And I think people will look at that and say, oh my God, you're really down on the Lions. No, not necessarily. I think it's every bit as talented a team as it was last year. Now, in fairness, in fairness, I remember thinking last year's schedule was pretty tough. And they won 15 games. And it was tough. And they got no help a year ago. They got zero help from anybody. And yet they still found a way to lock up the 1 seed, right? I just think, this is such a gauntlet that there's going to be a couple of games that you're going to lose just because you're beat up. I know, obviously, and the big thing, and I already imagine there's people screaming at me through the screen or through their phones. I know the injuries derailed a lot for the Lions last year. And I know because of that, people say that wasn't their best opportunity. I get it, but the injuries are part of it. Like, it sucks that they dealt with the injuries, but I did feel that entire year like this is their year. And I could feel that way again this year. I mean, look, if they start off like 3-4-0 and they're going through some of these really tough opponents, it changes everything. But it's a brutally tough schedule, and it's a storyline that we're going to follow all season because they're going to get everyone's best shot, which would be one thing if they were playing weaker teams, but they're going to get the best shot from all the good teams they play. I mean, there's not a whole lot of room to breathe. The thing about Dan Campbell-led teams and this current iteration of the Detroit Lions that does make them significantly different is that they have done such a remarkable job in the last several years of embracing those challenges. I think it's a huge reason why the culture has flipped the way that it has. Let's keep it 100 here. There's Lions teams in the past that when they saw certain games on the schedule, they just shrunk. They just, Aaron Rodgers is coming to town with an opportunity to win the division, or you're going to Lambeau with an opportunity to win the division. You never had belief that they would win because it always felt like they never had belief that they would win. And oh my God, it's 14-3 and they'd end up losing 31-17, right? There is not a game on this schedule that this roster and coaching staff thinks they're going to lose. I'm confident in that. And if they returned every piece from last season, I'd feel a bit different, but there is no guarantee. And there's a lot of talent, but there is no guarantee that they're going to be able to recapture the magic that made the offense purr like a kitten when Ben Johnson was here. Now, I can't guarantee the job that he's going to do in Chicago as their head coach, but I know that dude was an elite, like an all-time elite game caller. And you hand it over to somebody new, hey, maybe this guy steps in and he's every bit as good. If so, we're probably talking about a team with 12, 13 wins, and I'll come on here and eat my words. But I think there's a little bit more uncertainty than people think with the Lions. Roster's sound. You have a great GM. You draft really well. But you're still dealing with injuries. I mean, guys like Aleem McNeil aren't going to start the season at full health. And I really think the more I watch football, whether it's college or pro, coordinators are where it's at. Your head coach is the guy who kind of facilitates. He's the point guard. But your scorers are your coordinators, and we've seen regimes both be derailed and also thrive based on the results of their coordinators. So that's something we're gonna have to find out. This isn't me coming on here and saying that these guys are going to be duds, but it's inevitable that there's uncertainty with first year guys. I don't think that's or first year guys in this regime. I know they've been coordinators before. All right. Anything else now? Okay. No, I don't think so. So that will do it for today. At Castellani 2014 on Twitter. Hey, I'm on TikTok as well, and we're going to get to 10,000 by the end of the year, and we're going to celebrate. A couple other things. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube as well. CastellaniContent.com. That's getting updated every single day. Every day. One more show note, or actually not show note, but a content note. We will be at the Lone Goat June 6th. Detroit Tigers watch party against the Chicago Cubs. It seems like that is becoming a thing that's more known. Maybe it's an ego feed thing. I don't know. I'm nervous for that. I really want that to go well. And I hope people arrive, and it means a lot to me. This community of Tiger fans means a lot to me. And I don't always have the opportunity to be around you guys and watch games with you guys. So this is something that I really do look forward to. And yeah, it is a pseudo 30th birthday celebration. I'm not bringing out a cake or any of that shit. I'm just, pointing it out. But Lone Goat, it's a 5-minute walk from Comerica Park. That will start at 5 p.m. on June 6th. So that should do it for today's show. I appreciate your guys' continued support. Chris and company this week. Foolish Baseball will be on a.k.a. Bailey, will be joining us on the program. His second appearance. I look forward to picking his brain. We're going to get straight baseball talk. He's not called Foolish Literature. We're going to be talking about the world's greatest game, and I look forward to that. So thank you all for your continued support. I love you guys to death. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.